Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 34th virtual fireside talk in this series organised by the University of Buckingham. And it's lovely, isn't it? Because it's a Friday evening, and we've got one of my most special people on earth, the very, very exceptional Rachel Kelly. Who is an author, a journalist, and a campaigner for mental health with SANE and Rethinking Mental Illness. And she is going to be talking to us about food and poetry and moods and relationships. And I think that what's really important about tonight's talk is that it's experiential. It isn't knowing stuff about mental wellness is one thing, but actually applying it to our own lives. And that means listening in an altogether different kind of way to the talk last night about Stonehenge. Which is much more of a cognitive experience, this and wonderful. This is very much a holistic experience. And Rachel, I just wondered, can I just say for those, by the way, new to the series, a very warm welcome. My name's Anthony Selden, and I'm so proud to have you on. We have well over, getting up to 1,500 people watching this talk already. They'll go up. Can I just say, if you're new to the talk, please have questions ready for Rachel. We can only take questions, I'm afraid, in teams. Shorter questions are good. And also to say that if you enjoy tonight, and obviously you're all going to enjoy tonight, do tweet about the series, find out how to get hold of them, and circulate this series to family, friends, colleagues. You're very, very welcome. Every single speaker is speaking for nothing. Those who demand a fee, I say no to. It's all part of the outreach of the University of Buckingham to the world and beyond. So Rachel, where are you at the moment?
Well, good evening. Yes, I'm very lucky. I'm in the Lake District and I'm in an upstairs bedroom of my parents' house.
Is this a room where you did any writing, and do you have a favourite place to write?
Actually, funnily enough, I have done a lot of writing in this book. I'm on my 6th book now about well-being and strategies for good mental health. And there's a bed over there, which is out of screen, I think. And I like to curl up in bed, lots of pillows, prop myself up with my laptop, and that's where I often write. Yes.
And who is your favourite Lake District writer?
Gosh, it's hard, isn't it? It's not very original. It's probably a toss-up between Wordsworth and Coleridge. Probably Wordsworth wins. We're very close to Cockermouth, which is where his father was born. His father was a factor up here in the Lake District, and so he's born and bred. And with my links to Cockermouth, I think I probably come down for Wordsworth.
That's a good choice. So, Rachel, thank you so much for coming and being on our series with us and joining us as our guest. And over to you.
Well, thank you, Anthony. I was thinking about this talk, and I was thinking how different, in a way, it is from previous times I've talked about my own experience of serious ill health, mental ill health, and recovery, because we are in very different times. And I think where I feel I am personally is that even though this is a very difficult and anxious time for many of us, it is also potentially a very interesting and exciting time to reset and to think rather differently about maybe routines which have become ruts, ways of being which weren't serving us. And I think that's what's been happening to me actually through this period, is actually also rethinking some of my strategies. So this is actually a very first time I've talked in this way about what's really helping me through this period and what I hope will help you. So what I want to do is I just want to start and just really explain why I'm talking. And actually, if you'd asked me a few years ago, you know, would I be chatting to someone like Anthony, a big hero of mine? I think I'd have terrible imposter syndrome and thinking, you know, by what right am I telling you about these ideas? And really, everything comes from my own personal experience. So the word expert actually comes from experience. And my experience in this field, it begins in 1997. I can't see any of you, but maybe some of you are young and were not even around in 1997. In 1997, I myself was in my early 30s, and I was working at that point as a journalist at the Times. I was working in the newsroom, and it was an exciting job, but it was a very demanding job. And maybe like some of the pressures in today's world, it was 24/7 job. We could be working on a Sunday, rung up at 10 o'clock at night saying, oh, look, you know, the Guardian splashed on that story, you know, can you do a follow-up? Exciting job, but a stressful job. And I think when we're thinking about our well-being, we always have to think of the wider context of who we're with and our relationships and what kind of stresses they're under. So at that point, my husband, Sebastian, who's may hover in the background, yes, so he was a junior banker and he was working in finance. And again, it was an exciting job. Again, it was a stressful job. You know, he could be doing up all-nighters, eating pizza, trying to get the deal done. And, you know, exciting but stressful. And we had 2 small children. So we had, you know, quite a lot of pressures, but I felt I was managing. I was worried from time to time, but on the whole, I seemed to be keeping going. And then what happened was one night, and it was in May 1997. So anybody old enough, that was the Blair landslide election, if you remember. At that point, I went to bed, but I couldn't get to sleep. I subsequently learned that actually insomnia is a very common characteristic of people who are suffering from anxiety and depression. I didn't know that at the time. I just knew I couldn't get to sleep. And actually that would have been okay. But unfortunately, with this insomnia came some quite alarming physical symptoms. I can remember them very well. The first thing that happened is that my heart started to speed up. I remember thinking it was beating very hard. It was a bit like, I don't know if any of you know, like when you get a gym shoe in the washing machine and it's kind of going thump, thump, thump. It felt a bit like that, like it might sort of burst out of my rib cage. And my thoughts were very worrying. They were very sort of catastrophic kind of thoughts. They're like, oh, if I don't get to sleep, I can't get to work. I can't get to work. I'll lose the job. I'll lose the family, lose the house, won't be able to pay the bills. You know, it'll all be over very quickly. This sort of hero to zero, you know, everything would unravel very quickly in my life. So I'd had these sort of racing thoughts. And I also remember feeling very sick, nauseous, like I might have to throw up. And I didn't throw up, but I kept feeling very, very sick. And these symptoms just got worse and worse as the night drew on. I remember at the time having an image of somebody skating. I remember thinking it was like someone doing figures of 8 on the ice, and the marks just kept getting sort of deeper and darker and darker and deeper, and round and round and round it went. Anyway, the next morning I got up, and supposedly I was quite a sort of high functioning person, you might say. And I thought, well, I'll refasten activity to its normal timetable. I'll breakfast at breakfast time, I'll lunch at lunchtime, I'll dine at dinner time, and then I'll be able to sleep at night time. But unfortunately, this didn't happen. These symptoms got worse and worse. I felt iller and iller, and it went on for the best part of 3 days and 3 nights. And by that point, I was really very unwell, and I found myself in hospital. And actually, when I got to hospital, my husband took me, and I assumed I was about to see a cardiologist. I imagined I was having a heart attack. And the doctor sat me down and he said, no, he said, I'm not a cardiologist. He said, I'm a psychiatrist. And I said, no, you've really made a mistake there. I'm not a sort of mental illness. Oh, no, that's not me at all. And he said, well, you're showing really classic symptoms of a major anxiety-driven depressive episode. So you'll have heard of the fear, fight or flight response. And so this is when we ready ourselves for a threat. So the beating heart was to pump the blood round that bit faster. So in theory, I could run away from that lion on the savannah. The racing thoughts were to sort of grip the situation and be able to deal with it. The stomach nausea was to empty my stomach so I could run faster. They were all the symptoms of this natural response to threat. But the thing about this response to threat is it should be short-lived, but unfortunately it had become chronic. And in a device or a method that we don't quite understand, these kinds of very anxious symptoms can morph into serious anxiety-driven depression, and that's what happened to me. I was ill for 6 months. I went into hospital, and I was utterly, if that's the right word, suicidal. And the reason I was suicidal was not that I didn't have a good life. I did. It's just that I felt so desperately ill, and I was in this extraordinary physical pain, and I was screaming and just saying I wanted it to end. I couldn't go on, and it had to stop. I was mainly sedated with a lot of heavy drugs, which interestingly, the main approaches to treating serious depression haven't really changed since I've been involved in this field. It's still basically a medication approach now with a bit of added therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, but I didn't have any of that. I was very much a drugs approach, sleeping pills, the kind of antidepressants that calm you down, and anti-anxiety medications. So I took a lot of medication and I got better. And that would have been the end of the story. What then happened was that I shut this whole topic down. I didn't want to think I could suffer from depression. I went back to work. I kept going, a busy bee. I never even thought there was a topic about looking after my psychological well-being. I wanted the whole thing to go away, and I thought my luck would hold. And I'm a very optimistic person, actually. And my luck did hold for a bit, but then it didn't. And I suffered a second major depressive episode. It was a similar circumstances: insomnia, overwhelm, a lot of these anxiety symptoms, chronic pain, suicidal, incredibly unwell. And that time I was really unwell for the best part of 2 years. And I know it was 2 years because one of these boys that was young before had gone to school by that point. And I know any parent listening will know that they want to pick up their children from school. And I didn't pick up my son for those 2 years. And I remember he got a prize for bravery. Feel a bit emotional. I always feel emotional when thinking about this, because while I don't regret what's happened to me, one of the reasons I'm passionate about sharing some of these ideas is that I don't wish it on anyone. And what I'm going to go on to do is just share now some of the things that I use to stay calm and well. And they've been particularly relevant in this period, because after that second episode, I didn't suddenly get better. I got a little bit better. I went back down a little bit better. But the difference was I decided to look at this topic, and I decided to kind of research what could I do, were there other approaches beyond medication, were there other things I could do. So what I'm sharing is really the fruits of that journey, been best part of a decade. And then since I've been involved, I've been very lucky to work with some of these mental health charities and learn from others in this condition. The thing I want to start with, and maybe we could just have the first slide up there. I think we've got some good food, good poetry, good mood. Okay, and now if I could just have the next slide. So there we go. I just ran through, roughly my story, and now finding the positives in the negatives. One of my books is called Singing in the Rain, and it's full of practical strategies. Moving on the next slide, please. I'll just give you a moment to read that. So it's a surprisingly physical sensation with a surprising resemblance to coronary pain, because it too is total, but it cannot be relieved quickly. It even threatens life. It is oneself and not part of one's machinery, a form of total paralysis of desire, hope, capacity to decide what to do, to think or to feel except pain and misery. And that was Dr. John Horder. So he actually had both cancer and a coronary heart attack. He said the physical pain of depression was worse than either of them. And it really struck a chord with me when I came across this. And it's one of the reasons that I became particularly interested in using nutrition as a way to manage my mental health, because what I feel more and more is that a kind of old-fashioned, possibly Cartesian split, you'll know the word, comes from René Descartes, the French scientist, split between mind and body, is just misguided, and that this experience of serious mental illness is so physical, and that's why nutrition can be such an important way of helping yourself. I came across this because I saw my GP about 5 years ago, and she said, "How are you getting on?" And I said, "Okay. And how's the mindfulness, and how's the cognitive behavioral therapy and some of the other strategies I tried?" And then she said, "And what about happy foods?" And I said, "Well, I don't know anything about happy foods." And she said, "Well, it's a new field, nutritional psychiatry, you might want to take a look." And she mentioned 3, dark green leafy vegetables, dark chocolate and oily fish. And I thought, well, this is good. I like dark chocolate. I said, "Can you help me?" She said, "No. A GP in the NHS gets around 7 hours training in nutrition." I teamed up with a wonderful nutritional therapist, also a doctor, to really try and find out what and how can nutrition help us. And I'm just going to share some of the sort of top findings. I did a book about this called The Happy Kitchen, Good Mood Food. So it's something I've gone to in great detail. Why I think it's such a good strategy for this COVID period is that, a lot of us are feeling a lack of agency. We're in a world beyond our control, but actually we can feel very empowered by using nutrition. We have all got to eat. And I think it's something that can actually make a huge difference. So just share the sort of where the research is and what I do to really use food to help my mood. Next slide, please. So I think the key findings of scientists in this field is the importance of healthy fats. So here's the thing, there's 3 kinds of fats. There's 3s, 6s and 9s. We need a balance in all 3. For most people on a high fat, high sugar Western diet, we might say, we tend to have slightly not enough of the omega-3 fats. Why are these omega-3 fats so important? Well, there seems to be a link between enough omega-3 fats and inflammation. Now, this is a key new area of the importance of nutrition. The key person, a lot of work going on at Cambridge University on this, is the idea that when we're depressed, our whole system is actually inflamed. In the old days, we didn't think your brain could be inflamed in this way. Now scientists are thinking that actually this can make a big difference to increase the amount of these omega-3 fats. Where are we going to find them? Salmon, mackerel, flax seeds, walnuts. And actually really interesting work also happening not just at Cambridge, but also in prisons. So what they're finding is that they supplement prisoners' diets with omega-3s, they're less violent and aggressive. So rule number 1, healthy fats. Rule number 2, the gut is our second brain. Now, this is about this understanding of this sort of mental and physical connection, which was my experience, and which is where I feel now research is happening. So the idea being is that in the old days, we thought it was mental illness was just in our head. Now we realize that actually there are as many messages going from our head to our stomach as our stomach to our head. Now, that, when you feel stressed and nervous, you get kind of butterflies in your stomach and you feel stressed. And these 2 are linked by something called the vagus nerve. What can we actually do about this? Well, we want a nice, calm digestive system. And if we manage to do that, we're likely to feel calmer mentally and psychologically. How can we do this? Well, probiotics and prebiotics. This is how I remember it. Sorry, just go back up a bit. So I haven't quite got back there. We haven't quite. Oh, well, I can remember. Yeah, so probiotics. The way I remember it is like the O in yogurt. The probiotics are the actually healthy bacteria. We want more of this healthy bacteria for our gut microbiome, which just means the makeup of the our digestive tract. But we also want the prebiotics. And that's what the bacteria feed on. So when my GP said the dark green leafy vegetables, that's because our healthy bacteria needs the right thing to eat. Second point is variety, and I really love this. So a lot of diets are restrictive. They say don't eat this and don't eat that. most people perhaps might not realize that our ancestors probably ate around 150 different kinds of food each day. They were itinerant, they moved around, different berries, they'd kill different game. And modern man only eats around 20 different ingredients each day. And what we know is that our gut health is much improved by having a much more varied diet. So this is about variety and choice and different things rather than cutting things down. And that's a really positive message. And all of this helps reduce inflammation. We'll go quite quickly through the next.
Rachel, can you just go back over the probiotic and the prebiotics? So that everyone.
This is what we want to have a sort of healthier gut. This idea the gut is our second brain. We want more of the healthy bacteria, and there's two kinds. The probiotics are the actual healthy bacteria. So you get them in things like live yogurt, kefir, fermented foods. That's the actual bacteria in those substances. But on its own, it doesn't flourish in our guts unless we feed it. You've got to think of it like friendly things in our tummies that need feeding. They need to flourish and multiply in our stomachs. We need the prebiotics, and that's the dark green leafy vegetables, and among other things. So the two together is what's really effective. And sometimes you have one or the other, but actually put the two together and your gut health should improve.
And does it damage it if you cook it? Cabbage, I'm thinking of dark green. Is it better to have it fresh?
Well, what I think the best thing to do is to steam things. It's not so much about its effect on gut health, but it's more about the nutrients and things like the vitamin C. So if you think about boiling vegetables in water, then a lot of the goodness leaches into the water. So that's why if you can keep things not overcooked and steamed, and anyway, they're more delicious, because none of this is going to work unless you make the food delicious in the first place.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. So this next section is more like what I would call like a sticking plaster. When I was working on the Happy Kitchen book, we looked at around 400 studies, and we looked where we could find studies linking particular things with mood. So if we whiz down this next list, and I'm very happy to share these slides with anybody who's worrying that they won't remember everything. Magnesium is a good one for anxiety. It's also in the dark chocolate. Zinc is another good one. You can see there, all of these things have had links with depression, low mood, and the sorts of things that I suffered. So zinc's another good one. We're moving on to the next slide. Vitamin B12, vitamin C. The reason that's relevant.
Sorry, go on. For vegetarians looking at vitamin B12, who don't eat chicken and beef, what would you recommend?
Yeah, so in fact, both my daughters are vegan, and because of this interest in mood and food, they both take they do both take B12 supplements.
Okay.
Yeah. Vitamin C is an interesting one. Sometimes people with low mood and depression are actually anemic. It's worth checking it where your iron levels are. Vitamin C is particularly important on iron absorption, and it affects so many other systems that because we've established this link between mental and physical, that's why we've got it there. And then vitamin D, which has come very much to the fore through this COVID period, about how important it is back to inflammation. So we think there's some links between vitamin D and inflammation levels. Anyway, so as much as you can, get outside, and I think there's mushrooms are obviously a good one there for vitamin D. This is more a sort of sticking plaster section as opposed to sort of overall principles. Moving along.
Next slide.
Okay. So we're going to move now to poetry, which is sort of, I suppose you might think we've looked at a physical strategy and more. This is possibly a more psychological strategy. That was a line that I really hung on to for dear life when I was in hospital, and I thought I might not survive. And I would hang on to this line: "My strength is made perfect in weakness. It felt like a first sort of stirring of positive will, a positive mantra. I do very much believe in the power of words. That maybe my background as a writer, but I feel that a lot of life is about stories and words, and the words we use and the stories we tell ourselves. And we are all storytelling creatures, and that's one of the reasons I love poetry, is because of the beauty of the language as well as the stories it can tell us. And I love how that embodies in so few words, you know, that it makes sense of anybody who's out there listening to this who doesn't feel well, finding this time hard. You know what? Your strength can be made perfect in weakness. You know, you may be going through this trauma, you may emerge stronger. And I do feel that is possible, and it can happen. Right, we're going to look at a few poems that actually meant so much to me. So we're moving on now, please. There we go, good poetry. Next one, please. Yeah, so I think this poem has been really important to me. So this is when I was still in very desperate states and I was in hospital. Initially, my mother would sort of read one verse or one line, and she was very important to my recovery. And she knew that I loved George Herbert. George Herbert was a 17th century poet. He was a religious poet. And he almost certainly did suffer from depression, though, you know, not diagnosed at that time. And a lot of his poems speak to me. But there is this one that particularly speaks to me, which is called Love. I'll just, I've got a bit at the first chapter there, but the first verse there, but I'll just go through it with you. Love bade me welcome, yet my soul drew back, guilty of dust and sin. But quick-eyed love, observing me grow slack from my first entrance in, drew nearer to me, sweetly questioning if I lacked anything. And I think in that first verse, it spoke to me so deeply, because I felt that I was the person whose soul had drawn back. I was the person who was guilty of dust and sin. That felt to me like an amazing definition of what it was to be depressed. But what the poem suggests is that there can be another voice in our head. There can be a voice of love. There can be a voice of acceptance, quick-eyed love. I mean, what an attractive description of love, who's seeing my distress, how I'm growing slack, how I'm collapsing, as it were, draws nearer and sweetly questions if I lacked anything. And I think that poetry, in a way, can sometimes fast forward years of therapy, because one of the ways therapy can work is it kind of finds this gentler voice in your head. And for me, Herbert is that gentler voice, the forgiving voice of love, who says, I'm welcome, I'm okay, I'm good enough, I'm at your side. So George Herbert's Love is a hugely important poem to me. So just moving on to another poem, because everybody's different with poetry, and I don't think it necessarily speaks to everybody. And just here, just maybe pausing, why again is poetry so powerful? I think, you know, you have to concentrate sometimes with the great poets. You know, you have to focus. And I think that being in the moment is so good for our spiritual and psychological health, because we can't worry about the future. You know, we can't regret the past. So characteristic of anxiety and depression is we're not centered and we're not in the moment. And a really good poem can bring us into the moment. And there's something there we have to unpack meaning. And then, as I was saying, it can tell us a story. It can tell us a different story. It can tell us a positive story. And actually, when you're really desperate and you want to just replace the negative thoughts in your head, you can just slot in a poem, and it can just you can tell yourself a different story over and over and over. So we're just moving on. We're just going to share a couple of poems, and I would now invite you, if you wanted, we might all read this out together. Just there's something very powerful, I think, sometimes sharing. So this is Adam Lindsay Gordon, who was many things, a poet and a politician, and Australian 19th century writer. And this is Princess Diana's favourite poem, the late Princess Diana. So off we go. If you find the courage to say it. Life is mostly froth and bubble. Two things stand like stone. Kindness in another's trouble. Courage in our own. And I just think there's something there about simplicity as opposed to complexity, and coming back to essentials in our spiritual life, and making trying to have, you know, not just courage in our own, but thinking of others, and we know that that's very good for our well-being and mental health as well. And then there's one more poem that you might want to take away, that if we go to the next slide, please. So this is another poem that means an awful lot to me. Let's read it first, and then you can have your own response to it. It's by Rumi, who's a 13th century Persian mystic, and it's called The Guest House. And do join me in reading it aloud. This, being human, is a guest house. Every morning a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honourably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. That poem meant a lot to me. Its message of acceptance. There was something very powerful about the fact that life keeps changing. We keep having new challenges, and the challenges we're facing today, but these are time-honoured, they were issues in the 13th century. I know it's a modern translation, but there's something terribly reassuring about the continuity of what our common humanity is through the ages. One of the reasons I love that poem. All right, so we're moving on. Yeah, there's just, there's lots of evidence actually as well, and it's a field a bit like nutrition. I think that's why I wanted to concentrate on nutrition and poetry, is partly the sense of agency and empowerment. There's nothing to stop you using these, but also they're kind of relatively new areas. New in the sense that research is now being done in a kind of scientific way, but we've known about their importance for forever. Back in ancient Egypt, people would write healing mantras, poetry on bits of papyrus, dissolve them in water and drink them. They knew it mattered. Ancient Greeks, Apollo, he's the god of medicine, he's the god of poetry. When Franklin sets up one of the first proper hospitals in America, he has got reading and writing as cures. Freud believed in the importance of poetry. And as I say, now we're getting studies that actually show how poetry can actually affect our brains. University of Liverpool have done some work on this, looking at, with magnetic imaging, looking at what happens when we focus and read a poet. There's a wonderful charity called Relit that's also looking at the power of bibliotherapy. All right, moving on. Yes. I suppose that's something about poetry, about remembering, and how messages that a poem can put things in a way that we can remember. And sometimes when we feel anxious and overwhelmed like we do at the moment, it's very hard to make things memorable. And poets do that for us. They give us so many gifts. They can find us the words when we can't. All right, moving on. So I wanted to end really sort of three things to think about. We've looked at nutrition, we've looked at poetry, and I wanted to sort of end with mood. And I suppose really I was thinking, what do I really need by mood? And I think that really for me, it's about relationships, and it's about the mood I am in that allows for connection and relationships with others. And I think where I've got to on relationships in my own kind of ongoing sort of trying to understand is that actually our main relationship is with ourselves. And that if we can feel connected, if we can feel calm, if we can feel peaceful, and if we can feel at ease, we are much more able to connect and relate to others. And that we know very masses of evidence that connecting to others, relating to others, having friends, having social connections is really, really good for our well-being. But I suppose my learning is to sort of come back one step and to start with ourselves. How can we work on ourselves and our mood so that in turn we're better able to connect with others? So I'm just going to share a few things that I use really to sort of get to being in a calm, positive and relaxed frame of mind, such that I feel I can connect with others. And we can try a few of these together. So the next slide. Yeah, so just some of the breathing exercises are just absolutely wonderful. I'm keeping an eye on the time, Anthony. I don't know where we've
absolutely fine.
Okay, well, I tell you what, if we've got time, I wouldn't mind us trying a breathing exercise together, because I feel. Do you think we've got time?
Absolutely.
Okay. Hang on 1 second, because I've just left my book over there. Wait a minute.
Good moment just to take a pause.
Yeah. So I just I got a copy of my book. I did a book called Walking on Sunshine. It's a sort of diary of my year, and it's sort of what I discovered month by month of things that helped and made a difference to me. And breathing was just a real light bulb. I mean, I know this sounds really obvious, but I made the point with poetry about being centered and being in the moment. Now, if you think about breathing, and again, I hope I'm not sounding too sort of ridiculously naive, but you can't breathe in the future and you can't breathe in the past. You can only breathe in the now. And it's just such a useful way to come back, to be centered, to be calm. And as I say, then to be able to connect. So I invite you to get comfy, shake your shoulders, just feel relaxed, and close your eyes if you want to, but you don't have to. And we'll just try this out and see how you experience it. So remember, everything is here. You're the expert, experience, expert. The two go together. Take note of how you feel. Try to become more aware of your body. Your feet on the floor, your clothes against your skin, the beating of your heart, and the rhythm of your breath. Notice your thoughts. Just observe them with an open, non-judgmental curiosity. Sometimes labeling them can help. Planning, worrying, and then gently let them go, like leaves floating down a stream. And now bring your attention inwards and focus solely on your breathing. Don't feel you must change your posture, position, thoughts, or breath. Just become aware of each inhalation and exhalation and how your body moves as you breathe. And now expand your attention outwards once more to the whole of your body. Pay attention to how your body feels, to what is on your mind, and to the space around you. At this stage, you might like to turn your thoughts to others and put your own experiences into perspective. And now, gradually, open yourself up to your surroundings, and we will resume. Okay. I think everybody responds differently. It's really for you to sort of see how you experience that, and if you did feel kind of that bit calmer and more peaceful after you had done that exercise. A few practical things. I always remember that it's in through the nose. There's little hairs in your nose to get the air to exactly the right temperature. So if in doubt, it's always in through your nose. And if you wish to use breathing for calm and focus, you always want to just try and have the out breath that little bit longer than the in breath, but don't get too worked up about it, because this is a device to be calm. So sometimes I feel that the breathing exercises they're almost stressful because we worry that we're not going to get them right. But those are the rough guidelines. Okay, moving on. So this is about connecting to ourselves and our kind of relationship with ourselves. So have the next slide, please. So I think, again, this is just such a useful sort of mindset. Masses of research around it. This is sort of whole business of appreciation, really, and sort of looking for, the positives, I suppose. I started doing this about 6 or 7 years ago, and I just started, jotting down the things that I appreciated and liked. What was interesting was that on a bad day when I started, I could get to about 6 or 7 things that I appreciated, and then the more I did it, what I noticed is that I could just find more and more things. So on a bad day now, I can probably get to about I don't know, sounding like really, hashtag brag here, but I probably can get to about 30 things I appreciate. And on a good day, I can get to maybe, 40 things I appreciate. I think what that shows us is that, this whole field of neuroplasticity, that we can rewire our brains and that we can sort of reset these neural pathways. And if we look for what's good and we look for what's positive, this can become more and more hardwired. The evidence shows probably that writing things down does make this sort of whole approach more powerful. Not everybody wants to write things down. Sometimes you want to be with a kind of gratitude buddy or an appreciation buddy. I actually prefer the word appreciation. I know people often talk about gratitude, but I prefer appreciation. It's a bit softer. And I've already said how much I think language matters. But in terms of relationships, I find that if, for example, you're nervous of seeing someone or you're sort of dreading going somewhere, this happened to me recently. I haven't seen anybody much at all. And I had a meeting with someone and I was terribly, terribly nervous. And I thought, oh, gosh, and I thought, OK, what are the things that I really appreciate about them? And that allowed a really good connection between us, as well as, what do I appreciate about myself? All right, so this idea of using visualizations, again, this is a sort of, maybe you could just try it as I just follow the instructions. So close your eyes and then just summon up an image of when you were last feeling very calm. What did it feel like? What were the colors and the scents? What did it smell like? Was it warm or was it windy or cold, or were you inside or outside? Were you with anyone? Try and go back to that time when you felt very calm, very at peace. Bring it back to life in your mind. Just be conscious of anything you're feeling. Okay. And each of you would have imagined a different scene. In fact, one of the places where I often go to when I use this kind of visualization is a place called Hopebeck, which is a little river near here up in the hills. It's a very, very peaceful place. Just if we go down to the next slide, I think that a lot of people might have found that they did think of something in nature. Again, a big new field of research, this whole world of biophilia and why nature is so good for us. But also a lot of people may have thought of a time when they were with somebody that mattered to them, and how important connection with others and making a difference to others. I think there's something interesting about looking at the difference between solitude and loneliness, that solitude can be a positive thing, loneliness, not so much. And again, a link back there to nutrition about, if you can, sharing food. So remember the word companion, with bread, pan. There's something there about connection. So again, using the breathing, using a focus on gratitude, appreciation, using these visualizations, they can just bring us back to a sort of very calm, centered, relaxed frame of mind in which our relationships are likely to be easier and more peaceful. All right, moving on. I think you've got the gist there about this kind of holistic approach, and as I say, we looked at a physical approach, as it were, with the nutrition, and then possibly a more spiritual, psychological approach, and then in a way, some of these ideas around mood and relationships, actually combining the two. They're both physical and psychological, and indeed, this is a false division. So moving on. So here are a few of the sort of books that I've written that kind of reflect these. As some Black Rainbow really has got about 50 poems in it. Happy Kitchen there is more about nutrition, and Walking on Sunshine and Singing in the Rain are some of these sort of psychological exercises and things that you can do. So listen, thank you very much for listening. I'd love to hear from you and what you're doing to thrive in COVID and this period. And I'd love to hear any questions. And just know, I feel quite emotional, but when I do my gratitude list tonight, I'm going to be putting Anthony there, grateful to Anthony, grateful to Matt, who did all the tech with me, even though I'm really bad at tech, and just grateful to having a chance to connect to anybody there who's listening. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rachel, very much for an incredibly moving and personal and important talk, Rachel. Everything that I hoped it would be and more. And we have 1,896 different terminals are currently watching this. It's probably over 3,000 people. And thank you everybody for joining. Do have questions. We'd love to have your questions. They're coming in at the moment. Can I just say that what you were saying there about loneliness, Rachel, picked up with what Jo Cox, the murdered Labour MP, was talking about 3 nights ago when she was talking about the work of loneliness and the work of the Jo Cox Foundation. So
yeah,
the Kim Leadbeater talk. Rachel's also a great friend of Action for Happiness. Do look at that website. Thank you for everything that you do for Action for Happiness. We work very closely together. And let's go straight into the first question that comes from Adele. And she says, great talk. Rachel, thank you very much. What advice do you have for someone who feels they've tried everything, like antidepressants and exercise, happy cooking, and more, to try to avoid depressive episodes, yet nothing seems to work in the long term?
Yeah, I mean, that's very tough. And look, my heart goes out to you if that's your experience, and that, you know, that it feels like a battle and that you will never win. I mean, a few points. I think that we're getting better all the time at understanding mental illness. And even since I've been involved in this field, I think there is room for hope in terms of potentially some new approaches. So, for example, I was talking to my friend who's a wonderful psychiatrist called Dr. Carmine Pariante, and he was talking me through some of the sort of the new anti-inflammatory drugs, sort of antidepressants, but working on this anti-inflammatory principle, which is, I think, going to be very big in mental health, and it may come up with some sort of very new things that haven't yet been tried. The key book on that is Dr. Edward Bullmore, who's a psychiatrist, professor of psychiatry at Cambridge, and he did this book, The Inflamed Mind. Dr. Pariante was talking about some of the ketamine, not ketamine, wrong thing. Some of the psychedelic drugs working with I don't know exactly. Maybe somebody knows how you pronounce it. Psilocybin, which is a derivative from mushrooms, which again is being used for sort of looking at new drugs. I think we massively need more research. We don't have a proper cancer research for mental health, and anybody listening who's got any power to put more research into it. So look, I think that's a reason for hope. I also think that, you know, people do recover from serious depression. The numbers roughly are around 70% of people who do get better. So, you know, hang on in there. And look, what else could I say? It's tough. My heart goes out to you. I think we just, all of us have to live with hope. And I do feel that there is always hope. And I think that if one area for hope that's come out of this COVID period is that people do realize that mental health is so crucial. So maybe there will be more of a focus and looking at more treatments and more ways of looking at this problem.
Thank you for that very honest reply. Sarah here is saying, Rachel, why do I like sweet foods and foods that isn't good for me? And what kind of foods would you rule out that do not help mental health?
Well, if you want a quick kind of acronym that I use in my Good Mood Food workshops with my group, so we say cut the crap. So carbonated drinks, refined sugars, additives and aspartame, and processed meats and processed foods. Those are the ones really, if you can cut them out altogether. So some of the groups that I'm working with, that people who do actually manage to cut them out, they see an amazing change even in 1 week. In terms of their mood, particularly the sugar thing, because, you know, as you mentioned sugar, but, you know, obviously plays havoc with our moods, highs and lows. I mean, I think there's something about being very sympathetic and gentle with yourself. You know, we're absolutely designed to want sweet food from the moment we're born. You know, breast milk is sweet. We want sweet food. It's comforting food. I think that the way I've and I'm tremendously keen on brownies, and nothing I like more than a slice of coffee cake. So I really feel very sympathetic. But I think that what I've tried to do is that, yes, sometimes have these things, but don't use them as substitutes for good psychological strategies. So the warning sign for me is have them, enjoy them in moderation. I don't think it works to say good, bad. I mean, it just, the more the rules are, the more of a muddle we get. But you can have healthy and less healthy. So, but back to the sweet thing is, if you have something sweet, enjoy it, focus on it, but don't use it as a substitute for a psychological answer to a psychological problem. It's just to be enjoyed for the sweet food it is. And actually our bodies are quite clever. You won't go overboard on sweet foods if you take out that emotional element.
And let's have the crap again.
Yeah, so these ones really are less healthy. I say don't use bad, but really are less healthy. We've got loads and loads of studies on all of them. You know, some people say, oh, nutrition, we haven't got much research. Yes, well, these ones we do. Carbonated drinks, refined sugar, aspartame and additives, and processed meats and processed foods.
And that one before additives, Rachel.
It's called aspartame. I mean, it's sort of in things like Diet Coke, and it's in sort of yeah. It's just a, you know, it just makes us anxious and nervy, and you know, it just doesn't help at all.
Okay, Bettina says, thank you, Rachel. Your books have helped me through very bad times. Sophie has said, really inspiring. Will it be available to watch again? So can I just say that, yep, all the talks that have appeared, if you come onto our website, you can see every single talk, you can hear them, it's podcasts, and you can see them. Also, Sophie and Laura says, for those of us on low incomes and tight budgets, how can we still do good food? Any particular tips for those on tight budgets?
Yeah, absolutely. So tinned oily fish is just as good as fresh. I talked to Alice McIntosh. So look, I'm not an expert. You know, as I said, I did the book with Alice, and actually, if anybody who's got any really very precise nutritional things, I can always put you in touch with Alice. But Alice says the tinned fish, which is much cheaper, obviously, than fresh fish, is just as good for us as and is obviously quite a bit cheaper. So I think, you know, on the argument of expense, I think sometimes you know, you do have to bite the bullet that sometimes it is going to be more expensive sometimes to get fresh food and vegetables, but you know what, that might be an investment you want to make. The other thing is to be very artful with your store cupboard, which actually even setting aside income, which is obviously very important, but it's going to make it much more likely that you make these nutritional changes. So it's all about stocking your store cupboard, stocking your freezer, and having that kind of variety on hold. So we always say the 6x1 rule. So if you go to the supermarket, if you always got 6 lots of frozen peas, get 6 different kinds of frozen vegetables. If you always got 6 tins of baked beans, get 6 different kinds of vegetables. And so the tinned and frozen food, especially in bulk buy, also tends to be that bit cheaper. So I think put those 3 together, and hopefully you'll be able to fund some of these changes.
Sam says, when I've been through a similar thing as you, Rachel, my family couldn't relate to it because it wasn't really something they could talk about. What can you say to encourage people to make it possible for people like me to talk about what they're going through?
Wow, well, you know, it's really interesting you say that, because you know, on the one hand, a lot has been done to sort of reduce stigma, and there's all the work of the people like the Royals, but actually in my day-to-day work, I think some of the work by celebrity campaigners has been amazing, but it doesn't necessarily affect people who feel that experience doesn't really relate to them. And as you say, how can you make that something that you know, is more able for people to talk about? I think that probably the way that I managed to you know, my family managed to sort of relate to me is that what I needed to get better were many of the things that you would need for a physical illness. So I needed nutritious food. I needed someone to make the fish pie. I needed someone to pick up the children from school when I wasn't well. I needed someone to walk with me around the park when I was in a terrible state and I would be too frightened to get out of the house. I needed a lot of the sort of what you might think as the physical interventions that you need. So say somebody was recovering from cancer. So that's one approach. I think another approach, which again is about language, which helped me a lot, which is to say, you wouldn't say I am cancer. You know, if you're suffering from something like depression, I am not depression. I am suffering from depression, and I hope to get better. And but I am not depression. So I think sort of making that separation, and that it's no different for a mental illness from a physical illness. You're not one and the same. You are just suffering from an illness at that point.
So many questions here. There's an anonymous one here asking about exercise and saying, is it true that going for 3 bouts of exercise, either a jog for 20 minutes or a fast walk for 20 minutes 3 times a week can have as much antidepressant effect as antidepressants?
Well, the NHS guidelines on exercise say 150 minutes of brisk exercise a week is what you need if you want to use exercise, which is brilliant as a tool to manage your mood. So that's that. When they say brisk, they mean things like a fast walk or bicycling, not just a sort of, gentle stroll to the shops. The data we have on exercise is quite clear. There's 2 types of exercise which most affect mood. The first is hard cardiovascular, i.e. getting your heart rate up. That has the most impact on studies and improving your mood. And the second is actually things which actually, we think about it, are natural. It's to do with stretching, yoga, when you actually relax the physicality of the tenseness that comes with anxiety and depression. So cardiovascular and stretching.
Time for 2 more questions. Maria says, should the government be doing more to make better food cheaper and steering people more? And by the way, can I say the health secretary spoke very movingly about Rachel at her book launch before lockdown and said what an inspiration and transformative effect she'd had on mental health in Britain. So Maria's question, should government be doing more? Encourage better food?
I do know, I feel very strongly about the government doing more on research. I feel very strongly because the people I'm working with are absolutely desperate for, long waiting lists and lack of services and not joined up services. So I do feel very strongly the government needs to do much more in terms of mental health provision. In terms of lowering the cost of food, I've got to put my hand up. I don't really know my way around the politics of that. I mean, it sounds like in general that is a good idea. I do think that just as I was saying to the earlier question about new approaches to mental health, I do think food will come massively to the fore as a way of looking after ourselves. So look, anything to encourage that, but the mechanics of how that works and the free market and agriculture and farmers, that's a bit beyond me.
So last question is about coming off medication, and more generally somebody else is asking about, how can I adopt good habits? Why are bad habits so attractive? And what's your advice for adopting these good things? Listening to poetry, good food, good exercise.
Yeah, well, on the question of medication, I mean, I'm not a psychiatrist, so it is a really big topic coming off medication. And actually, it's an important point to make that anybody who's listening to this who's on medication is absolutely something for your GP or your doctor, and it shouldn't not something that is in my kind of competence at all. On this question of sort of habit forming and how do you actually sort of make all these changes and actually put them into action? Well, I think it's for me. It's sort of going with the flow. I mean, they've got to be things that you're sort of a little bit inclined to anyway, in the sense that if you come to them with the spirit of almost fun and not like you're banging yourself over your head and you've got to go and run a 5-kilometer run, which is never going to be me. That's not going to happen. But if you start from the position that the things that you're already quite interested in, so I was quite interested in cooking. I've always loved poetry, you know, and almost deepen and go into where your natural bent, and just see if you can keep focusing on those things. And then in a way, what's lovely is they sort of take up the space, and the more you engage with the things where you're naturally excited and they're fun and your intention is that it's something you enjoy, they crowd out the less good habits, because it's just not time for them. You know, honestly, I could bang on all night, and I hope I haven't banged on too much, but I mean, by the time you've read a few poems and you've made some good mood food and you've gone for your run, and you know, you're not going to have much time for anything else.
One of the best things about tonight, Rachel, and we're going to finish there, is that it's a very optimistic message, and we really can, however bad our life might be today or this week or this month or during COVID, things really can get better, and they will if we do the right things. We have that opportunity, we have agency, efficacy, to be able to be the authors of our own lives. And there's so much more that we know now, and Rachel has been brilliant at being an exponent of all of this about good living, and goodness and happiness and meaning. Thank you everybody for listening in. Can I just mention very quickly that next week we've got Rory Stewart, talking about from Afghanistan to County Hall, almost County Hall. We've got Greg Doran, who runs the Royal Shakespeare Company. We've got Luke Johnson, the entrepreneur behind various not very good, so always very good food outlets, but sometimes very good also. We've got Bryony Gordon, although maybe we're going to push Bryony till after August and more. Do share these talks with everybody. Do come back and look at them. Let us know if you can't access any of them, and we'll help you out. But above all, you know, I think that, Rachel, your own life, isn't it, is such a great example to all of us. Very few people have known so much darkness, and yet very few people have been able to articulate the radiance of the journey from that place to this place, where you're not only a happy, flourishing, wonderful person and writer and mum and friend to so many people, but you're also purveying wisdom. And thank you for that, Rachel, from all of us here. Bless you. Thank you. Absolutely wonderful.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.